of those officials remain in office. Fox News today obtained an early draft of James Comey's statement exonerating Hillary Clinton long before the investigation into her conduct had been completed. 2 months, in fact, before the FBI interviewed her. The draft shows that the term grossly negligence was removed not once, but at least twice. Even stronger evidence that the FBI's Peter Strzok's edits were a clear effort to protect the former Secretary of State from prosecution. We will add to the knowledge of that evidence here tonight. We'll also discuss the shocking corruption at the highest levels of the Justice Department with former Attorney General Michael McCasey, renowned attorney, Harvard professor emeritus Alan Dershowitz. Also tonight, more evidence of Clinton corruption. Judicial Watch has obtained documents that show Hillary Clinton and top aide Huma Abedin cut an unprecedented deal with the State Department, which permitted them to keep their call logs and their schedules private and hidden, of course, from all investigators. And President Trump remains tonight upbeat about the prospects for tax cuts, even as the health of 2 GOP senators and the cantankerousness of 2 other senators have GOP Senate leaders more than a little anxious. Republican rhinos Marco Rubio and Mike Lee are now threatening to block the tax reform bill unless the child tax credit is expanded. We take up all of the important developments of the day here next. Our top story tonight. As President Trump was inaugurated almost 11 months ago, most Americans very likely thought that the swamp would be at least draining perhaps only a little, but draining by now. We're learning, however, the swamp is much bigger, the corruption it breeds far more entrenched than we ever imagined. And the most recent hearings, investigations, and new documents show political corruption at the highest levels of the FBI and the Justice Department. Fox News has obtained then FBI Director James Comey's draft statement on the Hillary Clinton email probe, a statement that was heavily edited for the purpose of protecting the former Secretary of State. Here now to discuss all of this, the troubling corruption at the DOJ and the FBI, the politically motivated attacks on President Trump by Special Counsel Robert Mueller and his team, Michael McCasey, a former federal judge who served as Attorney General under President George W. Bush. Judge, it's great to have you here.
Good to be here.
I want to first say to you, I knew things were bad. But when we see a Deputy Attorney General, as Rod Rosenstein is, the effective head of the Department of Justice, say that there is nothing to see here, let's move along, thank you very much, Congress, I was sickened by that moment. I want your thoughts, your reaction.
Well, I didn't watch the hearing.
Right.
In fairness, I didn't see.
Not a bad choice.
Well, I have a day job, so I didn't watch the hearing. I did see some segments, and in fairness, I don't know that I read what I saw as nothing to see here. He did express concern with some things that were disclosed, particularly about Strzok, and that's an appropriate concern. I should say, just parenthetically,
surely,
that it seems to me a little bit odd, notwithstanding that the messages, the texts and emails and so forth between him and his girlfriend were explosive.
10,000 of them.
That those were disclosed when they were private communications. He got thrown under the bus. Now, maybe he deserves to be under the bus.
Are you talking about Strzok?
I'm talking about Strzok.
He was thrown under the bus.
In the sense of disclosing his communications with his girlfriend? Absolutely. And if I were working at the Bureau and in the Justice Department, I think I'd be a little bit nervous about whether my bosses were going to do that to me. But in any event, the disclosure that you touched on involving the meeting in McCabe's office, and another disclosure where I think she says to him, it's a good thing that you're around at this time.
To save the Republic.
To save the Republic. Those are extremely disturbing. And Congress has the power to subpoena anything relating to that and to look into it, and they should.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't for even a moment concerned myself, and I think it commends you and your integrity that you would worry about Strzok's constitutional rights, and I'm impressed by that. I'm being very serious. I am so disappointed in the conduct of everyone in the top of the FBI and the Justice Department tonight. There are not words to convey my anger and how deplorable I think the situation is that we face today. And it goes to the issue that the Judiciary Committee, trying to talk with the head of the FBI, the effective head, and he is talking about deferring to the Inspector General. He is saying it's under investigation. I want the President now to say to the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, release all of that information, damn it. And I do want him to say damn it.
Well, I'm sure he doesn't need encouragement from you to say damn it.
Nonetheless.
There is using the Inspector General's investigation as an excuse for not producing documents to Congress is completely bogus. I mean, I was there. I know about IG investigations and so on. And it's one thing to say you don't want to talk about it or make an evaluation of it because the IG is investigating. That's one thing. But withholding documents from Congress is inexcusable. And they ought to use their contempt power, if they're so disposed, to get those documents.
My question is, what good is contempt? We've seen what it did with Eric Holder in the Fast and Furious scandal, which was then compounded by a list of a half dozen other scandals, and he was never, there was never any consequence to him.
Well,
so what would be the effect here?
It's possible that there can be consequences from contempt, and I don't think that any high-ranking official wants to be held in contempt. I know I didn't.
Yeah, I don't think that Eric Holder personally was bothered one whit. Yeah. He was serving a president who he served directly, loyally, and to great effect. We have here an instance in which an Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, can't even be found, who is not honoring his constitutional duties, and whose replacement is, in point of fact, blocking the Oversight Committee from completing its constitutional duties.
As I said, the documents ought to be produced, and deferring to not producing them because of an IG investigation is not a sound position.
The two documents that the emails that Strzok sent to his girlfriend, his mistress, whatever you want to call her, within the Department of Justice, both went to intent to subvert, intent to alter the outcome of a constitutional election, a constitutionally elected president. This is outrageous, and I don't see a single person in the Justice Department behaving as in any way that suggests they are offended.
Well, I don't know. In fairness, I don't know what they're doing behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
But when somebody refers to a meeting in the office of the deputy director of the FBI as having been the venue for a discussion of ways in which to frustrate the election of Donald Trump if it came about, that's something that a bright light ought to be shined on pronto.
Yeah, and the irony, I mean, the weight of it all is crushing us as it falls down upon us, as we learn, because we're talking about Russian meddling as the basis of this collusion nonsense that led to the creation of a special counsel. When we're watching our own FBI, our own Justice Department meddle, interfere in a constitutional election, a presidential election. Why isn't that suddenly the interest of Robert Mueller? Why isn't that suddenly the interest of both parties? Not a partisan divide.
I understand. But in fairness, the mandate of Robert Mueller is something that we ought to explore because it's indefinite. And I think that was set up in a way that was not consistent with the regulations that provide for it. But he was told to investigate connections between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Now, there's nothing criminal about their having had connections. If they had connections or links or collusion, if you look at the criminal code, you will look in vain for the word collusion, so that he was never being asked to investigate a crime. He was being told to pursue, according to the letter that appointed him, to pursue the investigation that James Comey referred to in his testimony in front of the House Intelligence Committee. That was not a criminal investigation. It was a national security investigation.
And we have been saying just that from almost day one on this broadcast. So let me ask you, what is it in Washington where we have such weak-minded men and women in Congress, in the Senate, where we have such unprincipled people as the heads of the Senate Intelligence Committee, the House and the Senate committees that are working here? They see that there is no evidence. Richard Burr, Senator of North Carolina, the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, acknowledges we haven't a scintilla of evidence. So we're going to skip that part where we're going to show you early findings, because we have none. We'll just expand the investigation. We have a Congress and a Senate that are being led by some of the most duplicitous and weak-minded people I've ever seen in my life.
That's a pretty harsh.
It is harsh, and I can support it, I think, with considerable evidence.
To quote a famous legal philosopher and former New York Yankees catcher named Yogi Berra, it ain't over till it's over.
Yep.
And obviously,
he also said, by the way, Judge, the future ain't what it once was. And it ain't what it once was because of weak-minded, unprincipled people leading in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill.
I agree that we've got a lot of people.
No one thought we would be using Yogi Berra as our philosophical foundation here, but go ahead.
Look, I agree that we got a lot of people there who are not portraits in courage. But I think we have, I hope we have, some people who are reasonably tough-minded enough to see this thing through and figure out what actually happened.
Name one.
Well, I'm hoping that Mueller turns out to be that one.
My God, man. Andrew Weissman.
No, that is a person, by the way, who ought not to be in a position of where he's got control over anybody's life.
I just got started. I'm team member.
You mentioned the name.
Exactly.
Okay.
And put there by Robert Mueller.
Well, everybody makes mistakes. That's why they have erasers on the ends of pencils. And that eraser.
Hell, why is there such a low standard for a special counsel and his human-like ways, and such an attack, fierce attack on the President of the United States?
Strzok is working in the Human Resources Department.
Great. Now he's deciding who's going to be hired at the.
Well, I'm not sure if he's making any decisions at all.
Well, I'm not sure of anything.
It may very well be that Andrew Weissman ought to be similarly situated. Mm-hmm. His problem is, as you know, that he not only went to a Hillary Clinton victory party, or what was supposed to be a Hillary Clinton victory party, not only wrote a ferociously fawning email to the then acting Attorney General when she committed, as far as I'm concerned, a completely lawless act in refusing to enforce the travel ban. Mm-hmm. But he is also a person who has a long history of abuse of the obstruction statute, in which he brought down a Big 8 accounting firm, only to be told by the Supreme Court that it was overreaching.
At the time, it was a Big 5 accounting firm. It was Arthur Andersen.
Right.
And it was the only time, in my knowledge, and I have researched it to some degree, that any firm was accused of a crime rather than its executives. And the result was 85,000 people losing their jobs.
Right.
These are the kinds of people for whom I have nothing but harsh judgment. And they're likely to get harsher as we find out.
Again, he may deserve a harsh judgment, but I think he ought to be, if he's isolated.
A man of integrity, if Robert Mueller is that man, should he not say this has gone too far and too far afield, and we're going to turn to what we see, and that is a threat to the United States because of the corruption in my special counsel, in the top of the Justice Department, in the top of the FBI.
In fairness, that's not within his mandate. His mandate is to explore what he was.
Integrity is always within the mandate of anyone serving this government.
Not a freestanding notion of integrity. I don't want anybody whether it's Robert Mueller or anybody else, told to investigate lack of integrity as a mandate.
They've been told to investigate collusion, and there's no such thing.
Correct. And two wrongs really don't make a right. I think you ought to be told to investigate a crime.
Let's take the ones we've got, Judge.
If there is no crime, you ought to be told to stop.
I'm being told to stop by our producers because we've gone way over. And I've had a great honor in talking to you for these past few minutes, and I hope you'll come back and we'll do some more of it.
I hope so.
Thank you, sir.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Judge Michael McCasey. We're coming right back. Much more straight ahead. Stay with us. Tax cuts in doubt as Florida's Marco Rubio threatens to vote no. President Trump, however, remains upbeat.
I think he'll be there. He's really been a great guy and very supportive. I think that Senator Rubio will be there, for sure.
A full report on the chances of passing the historic legislation here next. And President Trump cutting the red tape, literally. President Trump followed through on yet another campaign promise to cut regulations. We'll have more on the president's efforts to reignite our economy next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. President Trump today touting progress on tax reform, even as Congress moves towards votes next week. The president saying Congress will, quote, get there as a pair of senators withheld support for the bill over the child tax credit. They want more of it. Fox News chief congressional correspondent Mike Emanuel with our report.
I'm so excited that we're on the cusp of this great accomplishment.
But late today, Senator Marco Rubio said not so fast on the issue of the child tax credit.
Unless they can figure out a way to add to the 1,100 figure, I won't support the bill.
And Senator Mike Lee said he's undecided about tax reform, pushing for more with Rubio. A Senate Democrat saluted that effort.
It's good that some of the debate now is about enhancing a child tax credit. Our side would actually go a lot higher than Senator Rubio, but it's good that he's making the effort.
Despite Rubio and Lee's reservations, negotiators still expect to roll out tax reform tomorrow. Some of the key points, according to congressional sources, 37% is the top individual rate to help people in high-tax states. Corporate tax rate dropped from the current 35% to 21% in 2018. State and local tax deduction, known as SALT, capped at $10,000. Repeal Obamacare individual mandate. Maintain deduction for high out-of-pocket medical expenses. Ryan was asked today why the tax plan isn't more popular.
If you look at the polling that was done in Ronald Reagan's signature 1986 tax reform, something like a month before it passed, 18% of the people polled thought they were going to benefit from it. So this is the nature of the debate on things this big like tax reform.
The Associated Press reports this package would most benefit big corporations and upper-income Americans, and top Democrats have jumped on that analysis.
It's daylight robbery. And every iteration, the GOP tax scam becomes even more cowardly, outrageous, dishonest, brazen theft from middle-class families.
The tax reform battle comes as there are reports Ryan has told those close to him he intends to retire after the 2018 midterm elections.
What are you guys doing here?
There's buzz on the Hill Ryan could leave even sooner. Today he brushed off a question about his future.
I'm not.
Tax reform would be a dream come true for Speaker Ryan, and faced with more tough fiscal votes, particularly here at the end of the year, it's not likely to get better than that moment. Lou?
Mike, thank you very much. Mike Emanuel reporting from Capitol Hill. A busy day for President Trump, who brought out the props today to show he's literally cutting through red tape and business-killing government regulations.
This is what we have now. This is where we were in 1960. And when we're finished, which won't be in too long a period of time, we will be less than where we were in 1960.
The Trump administration has cut 22 regulations for every new one added, which the president says will prove especially helpful for small business, and the process is going on. On Wall Street today, stocks closed lower. The Dow fell 77 points, the S&P lost 11, the Nasdaq down 19. Volume on the big board holding steady at about 3.4 billion shares. Disney announcing it will buy the assets of 21st Century Fox in a $52 billion deal, but not all of them. The deal doesn't include Fox News, Fox Business, Fox Sports, or the broadcast networks. Shares of both companies closing higher, about $2 higher on the deal. Good news for the economy. Retail sales climbing 0.8% last month. Jobless claims hitting the lowest level in nearly 2 months. A reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. And up next here, the biggest rhino of all. Is he going extinct? New reports that Speaker Ryan, he wants to retire from Congress after the 2018 midterm elections, or perhaps sooner. We take that up with Charlie Hurt and much more straight ahead. Stay with us. You want to hear every moment. Joining me now, Washington Times opinion editor, Fox Business contributor, Charlie Hurt. Charlie, great to see you.
Great to see you, Lou.
A lot of developments today, and important among them, the document that we knew had been altered by Peter Strzok, the FBI agent. But now we find out that there were 2 references to gross negligence, that there were other edits beyond that. This is far worse, I believe, than most Americans ever imagined.
If this were the case that was being pursued, investigated, and prosecuted, a prosecutor would have a lead pipe lock conviction on this. You have the intent, you have the action, and then you have the result. And there's no question that there was conspiracy here to, I mean, let's just call it what it was, to rig the election. They intended to do it. They did it, and of course, in the end, they failed. But they did succeed to pull off the scheme that they're aiming to. And you know, when Donald Trump talked about how he feared that the election would be rigged and that he was going to be very suspicious about the outcome, people thought, they accused him of being reckless, and they attacked him on that. And then lo and behold, a year later into this, the more we find out about it, the more correct he was at every turn.
And this after the deep state, the Dems, the Republican establishment, the Democratic establishment, have run a game on him from Jump Street. That is, put him under investigation, subverted the first year of his administration, whether you can argue to what degree it's been successful. It's been an immensely successful year for the president. I believe it would have been even more successful. And we have a Justice Department that is rancid and an FBI that is riddled with corruption. This is not something that is going to go away. This has to be rooted out. People have to go to jail. And I think we've seen a number of them appear before Congress. This is disgusting.
The most sinister and corrupt deep state that anyone could have ever imagined. Republicans, Democrats, and then the Hillary Clinton campaign all peddling this nonsensical Kremlin information against Donald Trump to collude, to deny. It wasn't even about winning the election. It was about denying Donald Trump the presidency. That's all they wanted. And I agree. If people don't, if very high level people don't go to prison for this, then there is absolutely no justice.
The president has a way forward here that I believe leads to truth and may lead to justice. And that is by ordering his attorney general, his deputy attorney general, to turn over every damn document that the judiciary committees have asked for, turn it over to every oversight committee and let the devil take the hindmost.
Yeah. How frustrating is it to listen to Republicans in control of Congress, Republican in the White House, and they're badgering the members of the FBI before the House committee who work for a Republican administration, and they still won't turn over the information. They're still whitewashing and blockading the investigation into all of the crimes that happened here. And when you look at that, if you don't see the proof of a criminal deep state, and I know that a lot of people get real uncomfortable when you start talking about the deep state, but if you don't see the evidence of that when you watch a hearing like what we saw yesterday with Rod Rosenstein, then you're just blind.
Yeah, I want people to be very uncomfortable about the deep state because it is a reality. It is a clear and present danger to this administration and to this republic.
Yeah, it's no longer a conspiracy theory. It's actual. It's been proved.
Charlie Hurt, thanks for being with us. We
Thank you,
appreciate it. We're coming right back. A lot more straight ahead. Please stay with us. Republicans demand answers from the Department of Justice about clear anti-Trump and pro-Clinton bias on the staff of the Mueller Special Counsel. One of the country's leading legal minds, Professor Alan Dershowitz, calling for a nonpartisan commission to examine Mueller's partisan prosecutors. He joins us here next. And this daredevil about to take wing, walking to the next level. You have to muster your courage for this insane stunt. Stay with us. We'll be back with a remarkable video right after these words. The only sitting cabinet member to ever be held in contempt of Congress is trying to play as if he has suddenly landed on moral high ground. I'm talking about, of course, Eric Holder, who would not appoint a special counsel at any time to investigate the large number of scandals that plagued the Obama administration. He tweeted this, quote, "Speaking on behalf of the vast majority of the American people." Wow, that's a pretty amazing statement. Apparently, President Obama was not the only narcissist in the joint. Republicans, he went on to say, in Congress, be forewarned. Any attempt to remove Bob Mueller will not be tolerated. These are BS attacks on him, his staff, that are blatantly political, designed to hide the real wrongdoing. Country, not party. Wow. Joining me now, renowned Harvard Law School professor emeritus, attorney Alan Dershowitz, one of the finest legal minds in the country. He's also the author of, most recently, Trumped Up, How Criminalization of Political Differences Endangers Democracy. Great to have you with us, Professor.
Thank you.
First, your assessment of that rich little tweet from Eric Holder.
I think most Americans don't want to see the justice system infected with bias or perceptions of bias. And this is not just whether a person's Democrat or Republican. I'm a liberal Democrat who voted for and contributed to Hillary Clinton. But I think I could be fair because I've never expressed publicly any views of hatred toward Donald Trump or anyone else who's being investigated. When you have people tweeting and sending messages or emails expressing hatred and prejudice against the subject, potential subject of the investigation, you have a real problem about the perception of bias. And I think Mueller has to do something about it. And what I've suggested is that he should bring onto his team a consultant on ethics. Mike Mukasey, who was on your show and who's brilliant, would be a perfect choice. Louis Freeh would be a perfect choice, a former judge, somebody who has the respect of everybody, a nonpartisan person, and let him or her go through the investigators and the prosecutors and see if there is bias among any of the people who remain on the task force or in the prosecution. And we have to, at least going forward, make sure that this investigation is Caesar's wife, because when you're going after the Oval Office, you have to be beyond reproach. You cannot give the other side weapons and ammunition to attack the integrity of your prosecution, and Mueller has given them ammunition.
I think that your recommendations for consultants on ethics are terrific. I would hope that there would be within the Justice Department those, including the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, who would say to Mueller, you just violated every ethics and ethical standard imaginable when you took 9 out of 17 spots in one of the largest special counsel teams ever assembled and turned it over to anti-Trump, pro-Hillary activists, for crying out loud. When we have to, a very lawyerly, if I may say, solution, but Professor, I prefer a more direct managerial and leadership-oriented result, which is you obviously, Peter Strzok, have written 10,000 emails to your mistress in which you declare your intent to subvert the president, to subvert the republic, and maybe it's time we order some reprisal and some consequences for such conduct. and not to put you in charge of HR or some department thereof. This is outrageous.
For me, his biggest sin was he should have recused himself. He knew about these messages before anyone else did. Now, remember that the law prohibits picking people for an investigation based on party affiliation or who they voted for. That's not enough.
You just said, Professor, if I may infer, you just said the law prohibits using common sense and common decency to assure impartiality. That cannot be right.
Well, it doesn't allow you to ask a person's
I'm not going to ask.
party affiliation or who they voted for, but it does allow you to see whether they've expressed hatred and animosity. Take, for example, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She has expressed this kind of view. She said Donald Trump was a faker and that she didn't know the country could survive him. And she now has to sit on cases involving the president. When you're in positions to affect people's lives, whether as a justice or as an FBI agent or as a prosecutor, you have to be beyond reproach. You have to show the world that you are unbiased and you're prepared to go after the person you voted for or to support the person you voted against. And what I worry about is these messages create at least the impression that among some people, certainly among this FBI agent, that perception was not there. And
not only among that FBI agent, the number two in the agency itself, Andrew McCabe, his wife, the beneficiary of the political largesse of Governor Terry McAuliffe of Virginia, one of the biggest fundraisers, if not the biggest fundraiser for Hillary Clinton. And the list goes on and on. There is no exception here. There is no FBI agent. There is no team member of the Mueller special counsel that is Republican.
We don't know that. We don't know that.
I do know that. Well, I do know this. Let me be very clear.
Yeah.
I do know that at this point, we do know there are 9 out of 17 who are Democratic donors. We know 5 of them are donors to Hillary Clinton. We know that there is no apparent Republican on there. We have combed, the national media has combed every resource to find them. They're unavailable to us.
Lou, let me ask you a direct question,
Sure.
and I may be embarrassed by the answer. I was a donor to the Hillary Clinton campaign. I like Hillary Clinton.
I would be astonished
I voted
if
for her.
you didn't.
And if I had been asked to serve, if I were younger, to serve on this investigative group, I think I would have, and I think I would have been fair. I would never have sent messages like that. I wouldn't hold those views. But I don't think just being a supporter of Hillary Clinton makes you unfit to sit on an investigative group. I agree with you that if everybody on the group
I think that
be,
in these politically charged and polemical moments, this is not a good time to be a partisan if you are going to be making those kind of determinations.
Look, I don't think there should be partisans at all. Justice Harlan, when he's appointed to the Supreme Court, he said he would never vote again in an election because he wanted never to be seen as partisan in any way. Prosecutors, as soon as they become prosecutors, have to stop being partisans.
Yeah.
That's the key. It's difficult.
I wish
Look,
that that judgment had been that he wished never to be a partisan rather than appear as a partisan because of partisan he was.
I agree.
And not many people, Alan, have the intellect to rise above themselves the way you do. Alan, I've got to go. We're way over.
Okay.
Please, your last word.
Oh, I said that Madison wrote in Federalist 51, if men were angels, we wouldn't need laws. We know that people have biases. We know that people have prejudices. It's the essence of being a fair prosecutor to make sure that those biases are not manifest and don't influence in any way your decisions. And
how human I am and how much law I need. I want the SOBs at the top of the FBI and the Justice Department prosecuted.
I don't believe that. I don't think we should be using criminal justice system to settle political scores. I would be as
it's
much
not a
opposed
political
to that
score, partner. This is
opposed
breaking the law and subverting a republic, Alan.
I don't
that
think
is
so.
not abstract.
Alan, I think it
with
raises
that, I have
ethical
to go.
questions,
Alan,
but not criminal questions. Okay, we disagree.
I think immeasurably. Thanks so much for being with us. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. Do you believe corrupt forces inside the DOJ and the FBI should face jail time for their subversion and violation of the rule of law. Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. And roll the video. It's exciting, isn't it? Video time, and here we go. This looks like 1930, doesn't it? Watch as the athlete stands atop a Boeing Stearman biplane before he walks along the wing and then jumps. A thrill high above California. This could have, by the way, except for the extraordinary video and the wonderful construction of the Stearman, this could have been shot 100 years ago. It's almost 100 years ago. Up next, Comey corruption. Molly Hemingway, Vince Colanese joins us here next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Joining us tonight, senior editor for The Federalist, Fox News contributor, Molly Hemingway. Molly, great to have you here.
Great to be here.
Editorial director at the Daily Caller, Vince Colanese. Great to see you, and great to have you here. Let's start, Molly, with you. I love the fact that Corker can't support the tax reform, even though he could handle it perfectly fine as President Obama doubled the national debt. He doesn't want to give back a dime to the American people of their money. How do you explain these GOPers?
Well, being concerned about the debt is actually very important, but it's a convenient time.
Then why the hell
to be
didn't they do
concerned.
something during the Obama years?
Yeah, and the Republicans just in general need to make the case. They need to demonstrate that they can govern. And it seems like so many people in this caucus are motivated to show failure as opposed to just a success here. There is no reason that they shouldn't be able to come together and work together. But not just Corker, but I think Rubio holding up over this child tax credit, refundable tax credit, which is
and Mike
extra
Lee
payment.
holding up because God knows why, Vince.
Well, same thing. I mean, they really like that idea that you'd give money back to people who don't pay taxes if they have children.
Then they should go join the Democratic Party and be redistributionists.
Well, they think it'll incentivize childbearing, which is a good thing. But it's such, it's exactly what you're not supposed to like about the tax policy, too.
The nature of a negotiation, the nature of politics is, in general, you're not going to get every single thing you want. This is not authoritarian. This is not a dictatorship. This is not ruled by one person. This is a collaborative process. And clearly, it's gone through all the
I'm writing that down, Vince.
Okay, please do.
Collaborative process.
Please do, because it's gone through all these machinations through the Senate. They're trying to fit it through a narrow keyhole in order to get this thing through, and that means that everyone's going to have to give up a little bit. But the key here is that every senator who votes for this thing should do so with this in mind. The idea is to keep more money in Americans' pockets, and if it accomplishes that, it's worth voting for.
Amen, brother. Up next, we'll take a look at James Comey's early draft of corruption. More with Molly Hemingway and Vince Colanese. Here next. In our online poll, we asked you last night, do you believe that by defending Robert Mueller and FBI investigators, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein has demonstrated an utter lack of awareness of the depth of corruption that has ensnared the upper echelons of the Bureau and the Department of Justice? 86% of you responded in the affirmative. Back with us now, Molly Hemingway, Vince Colanese. Molly, let's go to Mueller. It's a stunning thing that Mueller would have Andrew Weissman and others, 9 Democrats on his team, and also be ignoring so much obvious evidence that says there is no collusion.
Right. It's not just that there are all these people that are compromised, that were sending MASH notes to Sally Yates or partying with Hillary Clinton or sending these texts that show extreme hostility to the president. And also, of course, the language about trying to have an insurance policy. There's also that the Department of Justice, that top official, his wife was working for Fusion GPS, the opposition research firm. And then there's also, this is all in the context of more than a year into the Russia investigation, we still don't have any evidence of the Trump campaign illegally colluding with Russia to steal an election. So at some point you have to start wondering, if it's not that, why did we spend all this time on this? Were we not ourselves being subjected to an information campaign about Russia that has no basis in fact?
It turns out the great intervention here, Vince, is not by the Russians, at least in terms of evidence, but rather by the Justice Department itself.
Yeah, I'm confused by a couple things here. One, Peter Strzok, the idea that he was removed for an appearance of impropriety related to text messages that he sent, that seems kind of like lower on the scale than maybe a bunch of the people who work for you donating explicitly to Democrats. That actually seems like a more positive action to take in terms of being involved in politics.
Apparently the collusion thing started because they were worried that General Flynn might be vulnerable to blackmail by the Russians, but not concerned about 10,000 emails and their top counterintelligence agent, Peter Strzok, sending 10,000 emails over the clear to his lover.
Right, and you've got and a real curiosity as to why the Justice Department doesn't even know that one of its top officials was having secret conversations with Fusion GPS. Oh, and by the way, his wife also worked for Fusion GPS. How is it possible that they went this long into an investigation without knowing these things? Here's the problem: Rod Rosenstein, Bob Mueller, what these guys do not understand at this moment is that the public's faith in these institutions is shaken, and that is not a good thing for civil society, for the Justice Department and the FBI to have that little faith right now.